So what I wanted to do today is to clear up some things about sort of a misunderstanding in the spiritual community and in the kind of like the therapy self-help community, which is not everything is a projection. So what will happen is something really valuable that you can learn can get misconstrued, which is people will say everything that you see in other people is a projection of yourself. So that's just not true. The main problem here is that everyone is saying everything's a projection. So the thing that people want to always do is exaggerate. On the internet, exaggeration is what gets attention. So even if you're arguing with someone, you're giving them this attention. But I'm here to give nuance and clarity to things. So the most obvious common sense thing that you're going to hear from me, and I will always be doing, is to say sometimes something's true and sometimes it's not. That's the nuance, is it takes a little bit more, complexity of thought instead of just saying everything is something. So a lot of things are projections. The example would be people would say, like, if you get annoyed with someone, you're disgusted by this behavior in someone else, that it's actually something secret and it's part of your shadow. The weird thing is sometimes it's absolutely true. This is something valuable that I learned and got really interested in this whole Jungian idea of these parts of you and how you have these unconscious motivations. So you'll be irrationally driven by something, and what it is it's actually a part of yourself that you're in denial of. And what happens is when you're in denial of what's going on inside of you, then you see it in everyone else and you become hyperfixated on it. What I wanted to basically say today is that all of that is true when you haven't worked through all of that unconscious stuff. When you begin to unbury what's been buried and to clear through it all, none of that is necessarily true anymore because then you're aware of what's going on. When you're aware of what's actually going inside and you start to reveal and shine a light on the shadow, then you'll start to understand what's really a projection in other people and what's just real. And what I want to warn people about is that if you constantly are just in a spiral of self-analysis, you will make yourself crazy because you can constantly just have this recursive thought loop of, I don't know if what's really going on is good anymore. It's probably just a projection. And you'll just undo yourself constantly. You don't want to be undoing yourself forever. The whole point is to unravel these threads, these knots, and to put yourself back together into a whole person. That's the entire point of this Jungian psychology, is become integrated as a whole person, not split off by these irrational things where you're irrationally driven to be one extreme of a person and then maybe to another extreme. That's what all this projection stuff is about, is that you are pushing one direction more than another, and you're supposed to be a whole and harmonious being. It's like what you're doing is before you can spiritually grow as a person and build, who you are, you have to build on a firm foundation. So what you do first is you make sure that the ground that you're building on is solid and is a firm foundation. So there's a first step of this spiritual growth stuff. That is where you start to uncover all the little problems, the things that are rotting at the bottom of the house, the things that are unstable. Once you get that step aligned, as they say, then you begin to build on it. Because the whole point of this is to grow as a person and to reach a point where you're not just constantly self-analyzing and constantly self-doubting, but you start to know who you are. When you actually know who you are, then you speak with confidence. Then you know the difference between the projections. You're able to name them, and naming them makes them vanish back into the dark. So the one common example, like I was saying, is if you get really annoyed at someone, and I'm going to immediately just dispel that myth. So let's say that the person that you're getting annoyed with is someone who's really messy, has bad hygiene, is really disorganized, just really, really bad with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have a secret messiness inside of you and you're secretly nasty and dirty. It could just mean, the simple answer here is that you're a person who has already worked through being messy and you've learned how to be organized and clean and efficient and to have conscientiousness and you're punctual and you learn how to organize your life. You've already cleaned up your act. So once you've gone through that already and you've moved forward, this means that you've become a better version of yourself and that you clearly see that that person is, they're on a journey too. And it doesn't mean that you're better than them necessarily, but it means that you go, wow, I can see who that person is clearly, and I can see who I am clearly. That's the person that I used to be. I've raised my standards. I have higher standards now. So it's not necessarily judging. You just see who people are. That wouldn't make any sense now, would it? Literally think of the implications of that would be if you were to say that person's messy, therefore that means I'm secretly messy and I'm driven by an unconscious impulse to avoid my secret dirtiness, that is something that would just spiral out of control because then you could never actually move forward in life. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Some things are projections and some things are not. Learn to figure out what the difference is. This is Spirituality 101. Maybe it's time to graduate to 201, something with where you gain nuance and clarity.